Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Man, it's great to finally meet you. I'm so glad you're doing this.
Yeah, it's great that you invited me. Thank you.
You have to forgive me. I've been sick for 3 weeks, so I may be sniffling a little bit during the podcast. I'm going to try and not so I don't drive everybody crazy. But yeah, I don't know what I came down with, but it's
Oh,
been
I'm
kicking my butt.
sorry.
No, I'm good.
Yeah.
So tell me, are you from Switzerland? You sound American.
Yeah, no, I was born in Connecticut.
Okay, so what brought
Yeah.
you to Switzerland?
I came here for an artist in residence about 9 years ago.
Really?
And, mhm. And I had been studying in Italy before that. And then, yeah, my brother was doing his PhD in Zurich, and I was really interested in Zurich. I mean, I was visiting him a lot, and then I found a residency and I applied for it. And then I have been here ever since.
How does that work legally? You can just live somewhere else like that? Do you have a work visa or something? How's that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a whole process because I've been here now for 9 years. So originally I had a visa through the residency. Then I ended up doing my MFA here. So I had a student visa. And then after that, I got married. And now I have a visa through my husband.
Oh, okay. So you have a Swiss husband.
He's Austrian from Vienna.
Oh, okay. No kidding. So are you
We're both
permanently
expats.
European now? Like you're done living in America or what?
No, I mean, we are in the States often, and I love New York and I miss my family in Connecticut. So we talk about the idea of moving back. I mean, it's definitely on our radar. So we'll see what happens.
Moving back, but it's not moving back for him though. So has he ever lived in the States?
He lived in Brooklyn actually for
Oh,
about a year. He was working for he's an architect. He was working for a firm in Brooklyn. So he's had some experience living in the States.
what a great combination. A painter and an architect. Two creatives that don't compete. I love it.
Yeah,
That,
works for us.
yeah, that's nice. And how long you guys been married?
4 years.
That's great. Congrats. Yeah, you can tell you're married to an architect. You got some pretty cool furniture back there. Or maybe you picked it out.
No, that was him. And
Oh,
actually he built it.
he built the furniture with the metal legs and stuff?
Yeah, he built it. There's a welding shop in Zurich that you can like sign up for. And he
No
went there with a
way.
friend and they welded the legs together and he kind of designed it. And the seat in the back are an IKEA mattress that we sawed together in our living room in half
No
to like
way.
make the each piece.
So
Yeah.
how
And
did he chrome it somehow or is it just polished stainless?
yeah, he dipped it in some kind of chemical bath that made
No
it.
way. Are you
Yeah.
serious? That's one thing because I do metal work and
Oh,
woodwork
you
and
do?
stuff. Yeah, and I've always wanted to try to do that to chrome something. So did
Yeah.
this shop that he went to and did this? It had all the equipment to chrome something.
Yes. So actually, full disclosure, the shop was for the welding, and then we have a friend who is working at the Kunstkiesterei in St. Gallen,
Yeah,
which is an art manufacturing foundation. I mean, they actually make like a lot of projects for artists all over the world. We'll hire them to like, fabricate the final product of whatever the artist is
yeah.
envisioning. And so they have like access to crazy resources. And so he made it.
Man, that is too cool. Holy cow. It's the only reason I couldn't, that's the reason I was shocked he made it. I mean, to build the metal, to weld the metal, bend it, that's reasonable. But the chroming part, I was like, what? Who does that? That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
So, do you like living there in Switzerland? You must, or you probably wouldn't be there.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. It's an incredibly lucky place to live. It's so safe and clean and beautiful. And I mean, I do miss American culture and I do miss my family. So
What about American culture do you miss?
the openness,
Are people not
the
open there?
well, I mean, It's just a totally different
You're on the spot now.
way of being. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to like speak ill of Swiss culture. I'm very happy that I live here and I'm lucky that I live here. It's just different. People are much more reserved. Yeah,
Well, though, that's a broad, sweeping statement of the United States because you grew up in Connecticut and the East is pretty open, but the West is a little more reserved.
true. I should be more specific.
Yeah,
I miss
no,
the
no,
East
it's fine, but
Coast.
it's interesting because the only reason I say that is because I grew up in New York and then
Oh,
moved to
okay.
Utah. And in New York, you know where you stand with people. Like if
Yeah.
they don't like you, you know they don't like you, and maybe you can even resolve it because they told you you're an a-hole to your face, and you can ask why, and then maybe try and fix it. But here,
Yeah.
people just disappear. If you're an a-hole, they just disappear, and then they
Yeah.
tell other people you're an a-hole, but they don't tell you.
Oh no. That's oh
Yeah,
no, it's so
yeah,
worse.
no, it's different. It's different. People are peacemakers here. They don't like contention. I mean, that's again, everyone. There's people of all types in every place, but that's the
Right. Of
general
course.
difference in culture in the West that I've observed. So, yeah,
And where in New York were you? Did you
just
grow up?
outside of the city, Newburgh. Were you familiar with that area, the Hudson Valley?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
A little
So
bit.
I'm sure you've heard of West Point.
Yes.
So just barely north of West Point.
Okay.
Yeah. So where in Connecticut were you?
I grew up in Madison, which is outside of New Haven.
Okay, I've never been to that area. Not that Connecticut's very big at all. I guess if you've
Yeah,
been to
it's on
Connecticut, you've been to that area.
yeah. It's on the shoreline.
Oh,
So and
really?
yeah, my father is an artist. And my
Wow.
mom is a farmer
A
and
visual artist like yourself?
visual artist. He did illustration when I was growing up, and then he pivoted into steel sculpture, and now he's painting. But my mom married a farmer. So I was very lucky because I got to grow up with, part-time with my dad in his studio and then part-time on the farm with my mom. And we were close to the beach. It was really, yeah, pretty
Wow.
idyllic.
So if you were on the coast of Connecticut, could you take a ferry to the city? Was it?
No, you take the train, the Metro North,
Oh, you
and it's like a
do.
2 hour, yeah, 2 hour
Yeah.
ride.
But I mean, the city is across. I mean, the
True, you
city.
can take a ferry, I think, to like, oh geez, yeah, yeah, you can take a ferry across, but it doesn't take you to New York City. It takes you to, yeah, Long Island.
We're testing both of our sense of
Yeah.
geography here.
You can tell I never did that. I never
Yeah,
took the
I don't know. I've never
train.
I've never done it either, but yeah, we took the train to New York as well. Well, cool. So we're practically neighbors where we
Yeah,
grew up. That's awesome.
practically neighbors, and now you're out west and I'm in Switzerland.
And yeah, all with people who don't express themselves.
Yeah.
Just kidding. All the Utahns, sorry. Anyway, well, it's great to seriously, I'm so excited to have you on the show. I've been a fan forever. You are sort of I don't know how I'm going to be careful how I put this because I mean it as a compliment. But I'm not typically a fan of the level of realism that you do.
Mm.
And to me, you're sort of like a unicorn and in that you have this way of coming off like a classical artist and yet a hyper realist at the same time. And I don't know what that is. I can't really pinpoint it. And it might have something to do with your training. And maybe you don't even agree with me. Maybe you think I'm crazy, but that's what I love about your work. It's so refined and so beautiful and so well executed and crafted. It's just off the charts. So yeah, I'm
Oh,
thrilled that we're going to
thank
be able to talk about this. So tell
thank
me,
you.
all right, you've already told me a little bit about where you're from. Is there anything more? Let's start with you told me you grew up on a farm and you grew up in your father's studio. How did
Yes.
you come to decide you wanted to be an artist? What was next on your path toward
I
art?
Yeah, I mean, I always knew that I wanted to be an artist, and I was definitely the art kid. I grew up painting and drawing all the time. And my dad was very kind in that way because I think he always really nurtured me and encouraged me and took it seriously from a very young age. So I feel really lucky for that. Um, then I applied to Cooper Union in New York City,
Mm-hmm.
and I went there for my undergraduate degree. And it's a very kind of, it's, I mean, I don't know, are you familiar with Cooper Union at all?
No, I've never, I mean, I've heard of it, but I'm not familiar with it at all.
Well, it's great because it's tuition free. I mean, it used to be when I went there. And so that was an enormous privilege to be able to get a degree and not have to pay tuition. It's a very conceptual program. And so I
Hmm.
was kind of the only artist working with or interested in realism or interested in figuration, interested in kind of like, yeah, these more academic techniques.
Was Cooper
Um,
Union just a general college that had an art program, or was it an art college?
no, it's an art school. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
I'm
has
definitely obviously
architecture.
not very familiar.
It has three different institutions. So it has art, architecture, and engineering.
Okay.
And it's, very conceptual. The art school is pretty theory and postmodern. It was postmodern when I was there. Probably now it's postmodern, or maybe it was already
It's
postmodern when I
post,
was
post,
grad.
post,
No,
post. If they're still doing
post,
that stuff,
post,
it's like,
post.
yeah, 15 posts by now.
But I really loved it. I mean, I think I was really open at that moment. I mean, hopefully I still am, but I was even more so then and just taking it all in. And I think it kind of blew the roof off of what I knew art could be. I changed my relationship to my own practice of art making, which I think was really important and good for me because I could have maybe gone down another path of being a little bit more yeah, like a bit more narrow in how I
Hmm.
was, yeah, envisioning my own work. I also studied at Lime Art Academy,
The
which
old
I know,
one, I'm assuming. It was probably very different back then.
yeah, it was very well. Yes, I mean now Jordan Sokol and Amaya Grippe are running it. I don't know how much you know about
Oh
the
yeah,
Lime
I
Art.
know. I don't know them personally, but yeah, I admire their work for sure. And I've
Yeah.
had Alex Venezia on the show, and he's part of it too.
Ah, cool. Yeah. I know them. I'm lucky enough to know them personally, and they're amazing people, and they're doing an incredible job with the program. When I was there, Hollis Dunlap was teaching.
Oh,
I don't know
okay,
if you know her
I
too.
do.
He's
He's actually on my schedule.
amazing. Oh, is he?
Yeah,
Oh, cool.
he's coming up.
Yeah, I
He might
love
be
his
next
work so
week
much.
if I remember right. Yeah, we'll see.
Oh, neat. Okay. Um, but so yeah, I mean, I had some figurative experiences. I mean, a more like academic instruction, I guess, because I think at Cooper Union it was nothing like that. So it was no like figure drawing classes or painting classes particularly. So it was very, yeah, approaching painting from a pretty strictly conceptual side. So rather than being more craft oriented or like
Right, right.
technique oriented. And yeah, and then after that, I went to Italy and studied at the Academy of Fine Arts in Florence
The
because I
Academy
felt
of
like,
Fine Arts. For some
yeah.
reason, I thought you did the Florence Academy.
Oh, yeah, Florence Academy.
Oh, that is
Sorry.
Florence Academy.
Yeah,
Okay,
Florence Academy. They also call it Academy of Fine Arts.
gotcha. Okay, okay.
Florence
I'm
Academy of Fine
totally out of
Arts.
the loop.
Which, anyway. And so I had some atelier experience because after Cooper, I felt like, oh, I wanted someone to like teach me how to paint and draw, which I think now is sort of funny because um, yeah, I mean, I wish that in some ways, I wish I could go back to that 20-year-old version of myself and like tell her that yeah, yeah, no one can teach you how to paint and draw, really. I mean, I think that you develop your own language. You can absorb things along the way. I mean, I'm not saying that there can't be guidance offered, but I think that trusting yourself and trusting your own intuition about an approach is probably the most valuable, yeah, thing you can do.
Hmm. Do you think that's the case for everybody? I mean, be completely 100% honest with me. Do you think that everyone has the ability to do it on their own instincts and their own intuition? Or does some,
Well, it's about what your goal is.
yeah,
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's about what your goal is. I mean, if you're looking for for academic precision, then like something very technical, then you can have assistance in kind of sharpening your, your eye and sharpening your perception and creating like a process for
Right.
how you're gonna like achieve a kind of realism. But um, yeah, I think that everyone, yeah, can find their own way. Yeah, I
So
do.
what you mean by find your own way, you're not talking about the academic side of it. You're talking about the art side of it, becoming, saying something with your work as
Yeah,
opposed to the actual craft.
yeah. I,
Okay.
I
I
mean, a
understand.
little bit of both, because for me, the way that I draw is the way that I was drawing when I was 16, in terms of my approach.
Oh,
My technique
so you
hasn't
went to the
changed.
academy. They taught you all the things that they kind of molded you into the Florence Academy type of artist. And then you just reverted back to
Correct.
what's innate to you.
Correct.
No
Technically.
kidding.
Yeah.
That's
And it
great.
actually kind of took me a little bit of unlearning, I think,
Yeah.
in a way, just to like kind of have the bravery again to trust my own approach.
So what
Uh,
things, there must have been a few things that you took from Florence Academy that you still use today um that
Definitely.
really
And
stuck.
yeah, I mean, I think that Florence Academy was an incredible, to get to go there and have that experience was an incredible privilege because I was just drawing all the time. And I mean, you do like 8 hours of figure drawing,
Mm-hmm.
life drawing a day or something crazy like that. I mean, I forget, it was pretty intense. And I had Jordan Sokol as my teacher while I was there.
Oh,
And
no
he,
kidding. That's how you know
yeah,
him.
and he's incredible.
Yeah.
And so I certainly, I think I did sharpen my eye and I think I improved. Yeah, I sharpened my eye.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I
So that's the
just from,
main thing that you took from it is just getting a sharper eye,
yeah,
more
I think,
accurate seeing.
yeah.
But
And,
I'm assuming you're not
abstracting
using sight
things.
size anymore because you
No,
couldn't possibly have references that big.
yeah, no, I'm not using sight size.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you move past that? Because that's one of the things I want to talk to you about. Maybe I shouldn't jump ahead here, but you seem to draw incredibly well.
Mm-mm.
Because what it seems like is that most people that are doing the level of realism that you're doing at the scale that you're doing are using a lot of shortcuts. I'm going to put that in quotes because this isn't a judgment, do what you have to do, right? But it seems to me that you're going at this stuff freehand
Yeah.
and they're huge. They seem so precise and so accurate. So how did you, I mean, because the site size is often, not always, but often artists will, because I've seen these, they've come to my school after coming from these ateliers that do site size. It
Yeah.
becomes a crutch because they can't draw well without it.
Right.
And so, and many, it's just a stepping stone. And I get that whole philosophy, but many don't. Many, it's just like, I don't know how to draw without this, so I'm going to stick with this. But you didn't only shake site size, but you went from site sizing to doing 4-foot heads from small references and nailing the proportions. Tell me about how you retaught yourself how to
Well,
draw.
I was making that kind of work when I was at Cooper Union. So and I wasn't making that. I mean, yeah, I was making large format charcoal drawings at Cooper Union that were pretty realist. I mean, I don't even really like the term hyper realist or
I'm sorry if it
photorealist.
offends you. I don't know how else.
No, no, no,
How would
no,
you
not at
define it?
all. No, I mean, I was flattered by what you said earlier about my work because I wrestle, of course, with my own relationship with realism, and none of the artists that I really look at particularly and feel inspired by are photorealists or hyperrealists. I mean, not to disrespect the genre, but it just doesn't actually really speak to me always.
Right.
So it's kind of strange to be working in a language that I am not often inspired by personally. So,
But that's the
but
thing is
anyway,
you're not. That's what I want to get to the bottom of because I literally don't follow anyone in that genre.
me
And I
neither.
would say accept you because you're not an exception. Like I said, you're a unicorn. I don't know what it is about your work
Mm,
that makes it different. And it's sometimes it's hard to define ourselves. And so I don't know if it's fair to put you on the spot to get you to define that. But clearly you're conflicted on some level, like, and we all are as artists. I personally hate my own work. It's like, well, it's a love hate thing. I keep doing it because it's my, it reflects my own mannerisms and natural tastes in the moment. But then when I'm done, I'm like, oh, there's more of me, you know? And I'm assuming you kind of go through the same thing. It's like, this is what I'm drawn to as you're doing it. And then you step back and you're like, yep, that's who I am. Am I good with that? You know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, complicated question to answer. I'm not even sure exactly what the question
Well, let's
was. Is
start with
about my
that. Do you ever go
relationship.
through that where you're in the moment, you do what you do because even as a teenager, you were drawn to it, the way you draw.
Yes.
Drawn to the way you draw. That's a terrible sentence. But but do you ever, and I think you've sort of already answered this, but do you ever just step back and say to yourself, am I okay with how I am innately? Am I happy with what I am innately? And do you have
Yeah.
that inner conflict where it's like, yeah, but this is just what I keep doing? Because when I make a decision to render an eye or a nose or lips, they always end up like this. But yet I look at other types of art and it's so, that other stuff is so beautiful. And you
Mhm.
have this inner conflict, like, what am I okay with what I keep doing? It's, do you ever go through that?
Yeah. Every day, all day long, you mean?
Okay. Yeah.
Every every
Yeah.
waking moment of the day.
Yeah. Okay. So that leads to the next thing. And maybe we should just get on this. Because I keep on beating around the bush, but I'm so dying to know. Can you define what the difference is? Or maybe you don't even see it, between hyperrealism, as you would define it. And I think we agree with that because I don't follow hyperrealism either, generally.
Yeah.
And, and what you're doing. Do you know what the difference is? Do you know what, get in my head, right? Tell me what I'm seeing that's different because I can't put my finger on it, but it is different.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that you feel like it's different. I certainly want it to be different, I think, because I mean, in part, I think it comes down to my relationship to photography, maybe in my work. I mean, I think of some hyper realist work as like being they're, very, very devoted to faithfully following the reference material that they have. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of more interested in, yeah, it's more like when I was like 15, I went to the Met and I
Mm-hmm.
saw this little Ong painting. I think it's a portrait of Saint John the Baptist, and it's only like this big, like 16 by 20 or something. And there's something about it that is more real than real. Like the painting itself, like the realism that he achieved feels, I mean, it feels kind of cheesy to say this in these terms, but it's almost kind of like transcendent. It starts to feel surreal. Like the
Mm-hmm.
painting has kind of, it's no longer like a representation of a living, breathing person, but the painting itself is like animated in some way and has like a pulse and a
Oh, I
warmth
totally know what you mean.
encapsulated in it.
Yeah.
And I think that my work, like that's what I'm after. That's my goal, much more than because I'm not, yeah, that interested in photography. Like I use it as a tool in my work, but I want my work to be operating on different levels than a photograph does. And so, I mean, I think also my work in person is very different than it is on a screen and on Instagram or something where all of the images are just compressed down to something so small, little thumbnails. Um, in person, I think people are always very surprised by how um, messy the drawings are, like that they are very worked. There's a lot of mark making happening in the drawing. They're not really refined to a level of like hyperrealism. So it's more, I think, for me, I'm always looking for ways to abstract the information to capture something that feels very lifelike in the subject, that captures like a piece of
Hmm.
them.
I want to pull while you're don't lose your train of thought, but while you're
Okay.
talking, I want to pull up something that I saw on your I think it was on your website. Yeah, right here. But you just lost your train of thought. My apologies.
No, that's okay. I mean, I think um
Okay, I don't know if you can zoom in here. I can zoom in here. I don't think I can. But I see it though. I was examining this before we got online, and yeah, there's so much hatch work in the
yeah,
shirt. I can't
they're
get
not
close
usually
enough to see it in the face, but I did see it in the shirt, and I'm like, this isn't that tight at all.
no. The drawings in person are way less tight than people expect them to be. Um and which I mean I love drawing. I the reason I'm like that I make work that I can make with my hands as opposed to being a photographer is like because I love the materiality of it. I love mark making. I love like large expanses of tone that kind of start to feel like landscape, that are skin, like modulated, like, form that's kind of this undulating value and yeah, texture, all of these things. And so I think that in the drawing, I try to really coax that forward to be very present, which is again, I think, a departure from something that's more
Yeah.
traditionally photorealist or hyperrealist, because those artists, I think, are more interested in kind of really having a dialogue with photography, which I'm less interested in.
So, okay, so one of the big differences that I'm discovering here as you talk, and you basically said this, but I'm going to say it a little bit differently, is a hyperrealist is literally drawing pores.
Right,
And you're not at all. If I could zoom into this, I would see hatching and mark making, not pores and little hairs.
right. Yeah.
Really? That's the problem with social media. Is
Yeah,
it's
you mean
just
you
you just
can't see
can't
it.
tell.
Yeah, I know.
But somehow I sensed it though. Obviously I sensed it because I'm going to say that nasty word again because you're the only hyper realist that I follow.
Mm,
And it's that technically, I somehow instinctually I saw that you're not a hyper realist, and I didn't even realize it. There was just something different about him, and that must be at least part of it.
mm.
Do you,
Well,
do,
thanks.
do you think part of it though also is that you are drawing freehand? So in some undefinable way, your drawings feel more like the human touch instead of just like a printer just scanning down because you're filling in one block at a time.
Yeah, maybe.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, certainly my drawings are very worked. Like I think that's why I like charcoal so much as a medium because it's kind of like clay. It's like you can kind of endlessly revise and mess and like push and pull. And so by the time that I'm done with the piece, it's taken me some time to find the information that I want and to lock it in into where I want it to land. And
Mm-hmm.
which is part of like, what I love about drawing is that discovery process and that pushing and pulling. And so maybe that transmits a different kind of energy to the work.
It's got to. It's got to. Yeah. So you're not just like focusing on the corner of the drawing and finishing it and then moving to the next thing. You're working
Definitely
the whole
not.
drawing
No.
through the whole
Yeah.
process and just
Yeah.
kind of having a dialogue with the drawing throughout the whole process.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so a couple questions. Um, we have, well, I'll tell you a story first. We have this little white dog. I have two Maltipoos. One's brown, one's white. And the white one's my daughter's, and she adores my daughter. And my daughter's studying with me right now, and she's doing charcoal. And she just
Hmm.
started using this powdered charcoal and just putting it on with like one of those little pan pastel tools. Do you know what I'm talking about? They're like a
Hmm.
little spatula with a sponge on it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what's happened is her easel's a disaster. Her whole area is just powdered charcoal. Her whole bottom of her easel, the floor all around it, everything's charcoal's everywhere. The still life
Yeah.
is covered in charcoal that she's working on just because every time she blows off her drawing, this cloud of charcoal just covers the thing next to her. But the
Yeah.
dog just adores her. So the dog sits under her easel and almost daily the dog comes home just gray. Like this white dog is gray from charcoal. And it's so sad.
Funny.
But so I kind of wonder when I look at your work, you must just have, how do you manage the filth when you're working at the scale that you're working? I have seen pictures of you covered in charcoal, but
Yeah.
if you're working in your own home and stuff,
Yeah.
how do you manage that medium and the filth of that medium? Is it ever ever a struggle?
It used to be when I worked with powdered charcoal, but I haven't worked with powdered charcoal in so many years.
Oh, you
Um,
don't? Okay.
I use now, I mean, I've kind of evolved to working with compressed charcoal pencils almost
Only. So
exclusively.
you're not even using willow or vine. Oh,
Only for the very first few marks, because the perimeter, of course, of the portrait or whatever I'm drawing is kind of the most sensitive, in the sense that, like, if I want to have a really clean white area
right.
around the head, then I have to be really delicate with my initial lines so that I get that, the position of things where I want them
Yeah, and you don't have ghosting
during
all
that
over the
initial
place.
finding stage. Right. So
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I'll use like a little tiny bit of willow for that vine charcoal, for just those few first initial mapping marks to kind of find the big shapes. But then pretty quickly I moved to compressed charcoal pencil,
So on
which
these
doesn't
giant
actually, it's
things,
not
you're
that
just
messy.
hatching. On these giant drawings, you're just
Yeah, it's
using
just
a
hatching.
point.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
insane. Are you
Mhm.
using stumps and paper towels and that sort of thing to manipulate? Any other
No paper
tools?
towels, but I do use stumps occasionally. Like I think I stumped that shirt
Because the
while
hair
I was
looks like it
drawing
might
it.
be blended somehow too.
I use my fingers a lot. I use my
Oh, do you?
hands, and which is so funny because many years ago I remember like our teachers telling me like, oh, you can't use your fingers, the oils, blah blah blah. But no, I definitely use my hands. Um, and I actually think it's kind of an important part for me of like shaping the drawing into being, of having the sensitivity of my touch.
Hmm.
But and stumps. But I'm really layering, because it's compressed charcoal. They're pretty sturdy drawings. Like you can't, if you were to blow on it, it's funny to hear you describing that of
Yeah, and all
yeah,
of it comes off.
and all that comes off. If you were to blow on one of my drawings, nothing would come off.
Yeah, no, I know. Because
Is the material, I'm really working it very deeply into the paper and like really pressing it in pretty, you know, yeah, with some force to kind of get it to get these rich values. So,
in
and the
what
fact that
kind
it's
of
purple.
this is this is the problem with a podcast with a fellow painter, but now I'm asking a lot of technical questions here, but what charcoal pencils do you use to get your really black blacks? Those are hard to find. I mean, the darkest I've been able to find are black pit, like soft pit charcoal.
Yes.
And
That's what I
so
use too. So
that's what you use too. Okay.
I use some soft. I wish I had, my card is behind me. I can go grab them later, but I have Faber-Castell pit sticks that are
Yeah,
like
that's what
about
I mean.
this big. And I use those sparingly just at the end when I really want to like hit accent darks and really, get that full range of values.
Are they
But otherwise
darker than the soft pencil
they are,
from
yeah.
Faber-Castell? They are even darker. Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have those sticks. I need to get some of those sticks.
Yeah. They're
Although I
like
don't do a
one.
lot of charcoal, but when I look at yours, it makes me want to.
Oh.
I mean, I would probably be frustrated if I was looking at yours while doing my own charcoals, but but at least it inspires me to get trying.
Hmm.
Okay, so that's how you get your dark. So what about how do you keep from ghosting? I know you say you lay it in order to keep the background clean so that the contours of the face and hair and shirt stays separate from the background.
Yes.
But even within the face, if you make drawing corrections, it just doesn't look like I'm not seeing any ghosting. I mean, you're not moving one eye up half an inch or anything and having ghosting from that. So,
I am occasionally, but I can get the paper to kind of get back. Like I would never go in with a dark until I'm 100% sure that I
okay.
know that the drawing is where I want it to be. So, which I usually know because these drawings are pretty, I can work on them pretty quickly actually. Over the years I've gotten quicker. But
Hmm.
yeah, once the whole thing is mapped out and I mean I see in value better than in line, I think as many people
Well,
do.
that's kind of obvious from your drawing style. Yeah.
Right. I'm really thinking in value a lot. So I kind of map things out with soft values. And then once I know that everything is where it needs to be, then I'll go in and really darken those eyes, for instance, and really start to like fully render and develop the form. But I can say that when I'm moving before that stage of like putting the darkest dark values in, I can still move things around and get the paper to be back to like maybe a 1 or a 2 on the value scale. Like it won't ever be like the white paper that's untouched, but it's pretty light and it's usually always light enough to
Yeah, because there's no whites except for the highlight anywhere.
right,
Right.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
usually
And what kind of
incorporate.
paper are you using?
This is Fabriano paper, that piece. But I've
Is it
recently,
Artistico? Fabriano Artistico?
um, I can't tell. I
You
couldn't tell
couldn't
you.
tell.
I think
Is it
so.
the kind that's got that texture that almost feels, I don't know how to put it, artificial? It doesn't feel like a hand woven or a handmade paper texture. It feels almost like it was printed by some kind of a robot or something or machine. That's the way Fabriano Artistico comes off to me. It feels very like it was made on a machine, like it mechanical texture to it.
Hmm.
As opposed to like say a watercolor paper, which is very organic and unpredictable.
Yeah. I would
So,
say on that spectrum,
yeah.
it's more towards the machine side, but
Okay.
I like a paper that has kind of a velvety finish that has some tooth to it. So
Okay.
there's not really any irregularities, but it has enough grip that and quality of its own that kind of the way that the charcoal like yeah sits onto the paper or it gets pushed into the paper creates its own kind of organic texture that I really like that I think is actually very skin-like in a way. So I kind of try to play with the texture of the paper in that
Hmm.
sense.
Hmm. And about what weight is it?
These ones I think are 300 gram,
Oh, so they're
250.
pretty heavy. They would have to be
Pretty,
that big.
yeah.
Otherwise, they'd be so fragile.
Right. But my favorite paper is now with Legion paper has some amazing, I mean, I love Legion paper. I think they're kind of the best actually,
Mm-hmm.
personally.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like their Coventry rag paper, but they also have a few new like heavyweight papers that I've been testing out that I really like that are even like they're super heavyweight, which I love because then they're just will never wrinkle and they just, look perfect forever kind of. And they have like kind of a weight, a gravity to them that I like.
I love drawing on heavyweight paper. I feel like I don't know what it is, but I feel like an amateur when I have this light, wimpy paper. It just doesn't feel like I'm
Mm,
doing it right. I like it to
yeah,
be have substantial weight to
sturdy.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you think of what the names of those papers are, it'd be really nice to know for the viewers as well as for me. I'd be curious. My students are all the time wondering what papers to use, and
Mhm.
the only one that I ever really use is you're going to think this is crazy, but Bristol paper,
Okay.
and
I don't
and
think
it's
maybe.
smooth, you know. But when you're
Yeah,
drawing
it's very smooth.
smaller, it really, because I'm only drawn on 19. When I draw on Bristol, it's only a 9 by 12. So even in charcoal, you can't the tooth just you can't get refined if it's too much of a tooth. So I actually like Bristol for small. But if it's bigger work, I'll usually use just watercolor paper like Arches, cold press.
Hmm.
And so that's and then Fabriano Artistico. Those are the only three papers I ever give my students, or I ever recommend because it's the only three I know. So it'd be interesting to know what you use if you can think of it at any point.
Okay.
Maybe just let me know and I'll put it in the show notes. But
Okay. But I recommend Legion paper. I think I
yeah,
like
they're a
it better
great
than
company.
Fabriano, to be honest. I mean, I've been lately just kind of only going with Legion. And if you go on their website, they have some pretty, like they have a heavyweight paper area on their website or category, and they've
Hmm.
got great stuff.
Yeah, you know what's great about them? I had someone from Legion come to my studio, and I thought any company that takes time to visit an artist
Yeah.
really cares about their product.
Yeah.
There's so many companies out there that just make a product but they stay in their little caves, and it's like, are you even talking to your customers? You know, and
Right.
Legion paper is definitely one that really talks to their customer.
Yeah.
I think that's why they're so good.
Yeah, I've had the same experience. I just was talking to them because I needed to find the paper, yeah, a certain product that they have that I wanted to have here in my studio in Zurich, and I only could find it in the States. And I was like, there's got to be a distributor in Europe, but I couldn't find one. And so I called them up and they were super helpful. And they found me a distributor in Germany. So I just had a delivery.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great. So they
Yeah.
can't just ship to you direct from the US, Legion paper?
It's complicated I mean, price wise, what I wanted to order would have been a little bit complicated for shipping and
Oh,
yeah, taxes and yeah, customs and everything. Wanted to see if I mean, yes, the answer is I'm sure that they could, but I wanted to see if there
yeah.
was a cheaper path.
Yeah. So if you have a distributor, there's loopholes as far as taxes and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I tried my son's in Romania and
Oh,
we've
cool.
tried to send him stuff. It's ridiculous. What did he lose? Oh, he lost his credit card and it took like 3 months to get him a new credit card.
Oh no.
Oh my gosh. I couldn't even
Mhm.
believe it. I can't
Oh,
remember why. I'd have to talk to my wife. She's the one who went through the whole mess. But yeah,
yeah.
sometimes it can be really hard to get things over to Europe.
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's look at some more of your work.
Okay.
Maybe we'll be able to, I hope we'll be able to zoom in a little bit.
That first drawing was a drawing of my sister, by the way. Might be notable. Just because I've drawn my
This is,
sister a lot. Hmm.
yeah, okay, actually, let's go to your Instagram because
Okay.
your first post is your sister.
Yeah. That's from a very long time
I
ago.
know,
Yeah.
but here's the thing. I remember when I discovered you, it was many years ago, and you didn't have a lot on here, but you had this and a few of the works were starting to build up of what you do now. But you had
Mhm.
this, and then you had obviously this one, and then you put, this one, and it was just like it wasn't obviously some of these, or not, maybe it's not obvious. Some of these must have come from school or something, and you were in a transitional period.
Yeah.
That's the
I
case?
haven't thought about that painting or looked at that painting in a long time.
Yeah. And what
Yeah.
year would this have been? I don't see a date
Oh,
here.
God. Uh,
2016.
2016. Yeah. Okay.
Yep, 2016. That's not that long ago. You're young. Oh my gosh, that was yesterday. Jeez. It's all relative time. I'll tell you
That
what.
first one is that one. The first one is maybe 2015.
That one's 2015. So were
But I
you
think
at
I
Florence when
made
you
that
did this?
painting. I think because I didn't get I mean, I had made this painting before I had an Instagram, and then I decided to get Instagram, I think in 2015, and started posting paintings from, the last couple of years. So I think maybe that piece I had made in 2013 is possible.
Really?
Yeah,
Did you do this
2013.
one while you were at Florence?
No, no, I did this one when I was home in Connecticut.
When
Yeah.
before? Okay, so how did
Oh,
that?
yeah, sorry. What you mean in terms of, let's see, I think I finished in Florence in 2013, something like that. I actually didn't finish the program, but I didn't make it through the whole thing. But
Okay, what did you finish?
I, well, I was there for 2 years.
Okay. Did you ever get into paint or did you just do drawing?
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
no,
you did.
I finished, yeah, anyway, I finished the program, but I didn't technically finish the time that I was supposed to be there for in order to get the certificate. But anyway,
Okay. Gotcha.
yeah.
Really
But so
screwed up
I
your
did paint.
career. I mean, just think how successful you'd be if you had that certificate.
But I was there, I think, until 2013. I think that's right. So maybe this was during a trip home, something like that. That I remember I made this painting in my sister's room while I was at home.
From
And
life or?
yeah, it was from life and from a photo. I'd taken a little photo of her that I knew that I wanted with a certain like light quality in it, color
Hmm.
quality. And this was painted over something else, which is part
Really?
of why there's kind of this crazy texture over the whole thing, because I was painting on top of something else. Anyway, yeah,
Yeah, it's such a great little painting.
thank you.
Yeah, I love it. And it's very different than what you're doing now.
Yeah,
And this also is different.
yeah.
You've got range. Holy moly.
Mm, thanks.
So what were you doing when you were doing these? I mean, were you just trying to figure out who you are and you just come back from Florence and you're like, how do I paint? Is that where you were at?
I mean, yes, I think that that might have been because I was painting when I was at Cooper Union. I don't have any of those paintings on my Instagram. I didn't document my work very well back then.
Hmm.
But and also they were mostly they were nudes. That's probably why I didn't ever put them on Instagram for
Oh,
fear of whatever getting
right.
taken
Getting
down
banned
or
or whatever.
something. But yeah, I mean, I think that this was probably a painting that I did at home while I was in Florence or at Cooper. And I was kind of just, yeah, using my own language, using my own approach for making a painting rather than kind of what I had been taught in yeah, in Florence. So
Hmm. Where are these paintings now?
that's a very good question. I'm not sure.
Are
Maybe
you
in
kidding
Connecticut.
me?
I'm not
These things are
sure.
just floating around somewhere?
I'm not sure. Yeah.
What? I would kill to own this painting and it's just floating around.
Oh,
Holy
thanks.
cow. Wow, this one's different.
Yeah,
This
that
one
one
you're a little more
is.
refined, a
Mhm.
little more
I kind
polished
of
in the.
like, yeah, I mean, I love Caravaggio when I was in high school. Of course, I loved Caravaggio and this chiaroscuro thing. Kind of, I liked this like gesture of this disembodied hand that was a kind of like coming and swooping the hair. And I think that that was why I wanted to make, and with kind of odd foreshortening. Yeah, this is also such old work. These are really
Yeah,
old
no, and
pieces.
I'll bring up your new work too. I know. Don't worry. We're not just going to talk about
No,
your
no,
old stuff.
it's interesting. It's like a trip down memory lane to look at this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now here's an example of a work in progress. And this is what I'm
This
talking about. I
is
mean, this is not much bigger than life if it is. I suppose it's a little bigger than life. Is that right?
Yeah, slightly bigger than life, but pretty close. This was when I first went to Switzerland for the residency. And I finally had I had an enormous studio space that I had never had before in my life and a lot of time, and which was so excited. And so I just started really then at that point diving into, yeah, the large format charcoal works, which I always kind of knew. I knew from Cooper Union that I wanted to do that. And I was working large, but not quite as large as I wanted to work. So when I was in Switzerland, I started and I was just asking people when I went there, it was summertime, and I was asking people that were swimming around the lake that was near where I was living, if I could take photos of them and draw them and, have them to my studio and draw them. And so this was a woman that I had met at the lake who was there with her daughter, her baby.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. And it's not even
Thank
done
you.
yet. But I'm
Thank you.
just enamored with the way that you're laying in the drawing. Even the
Mm.
way you lay it in is really beautiful. And you're right. You obviously see in value. Obviously, you're right. It's you know how you see, but um, I love how you break it down into just this light, dark pattern,
Mm.
value shapes. Huh. So, why did you end up settling on charcoal? I mean, you obviously, I mean, I guess you do paint. There is painting here, but you spend a lot more time doing charcoal, at least it seems that way, than you do
Yeah.
painting. Why do you suppose you landed on charcoal?
Well, I did charcoal even when I was like 12. I remember I started drawing in charcoal and I just like kind of fell in love with it. It felt like it was just such a sensitive medium and so immediate and so flexible. It had like all the things that I wanted, maybe except permanence. That's the only thing about it that's a little bit like where it's low on its permanence side, maybe.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are ways around that if you're using more of a compressed charcoal or pit charcoal, which then I discovered later. Um, but yeah, I just, I think it's similar to painting in a way because you can really push and pull.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I fell in love with it when I was like 12, and then I just sort of have stuck with it since.
Were you ever concerned that it would be difficult to make a living selling drawings?
Um, I probably should have been,
You were,
but I've always just I mean, it didn't feel like a choice. It wasn't, I mean, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be an artist, for the money. So I
right,
think that I was just being led by a real innate curiosity and yeah, feeling driven to make a certain kind of work and to see where it would go. And the financial aspect of that is always kind of like you just figure it out as you go.
right.
And yeah, hope that
Hmm.
it all works.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the way most of us look at it. I remember even just doing figure when I started out, I was doing portraits like you, not like yours, but portraits of strangers. And everyone told me, don't do it, they'll never sell.
Mm.
And I was just like,
People
well, I
tell
don't
me
know what
that
else to
too.
do. It's what I want to do. So
Right.
I guess I'll
You
just
just gotta
figure it
do what you
out.
want.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So speaking of selling, tell me how you ended up with Forum Gallery. That's a gallery that I always wanted to be part of. But right now I'm not with any galleries, so I'm good where I'm at. But if I could be with any gallery, it would have been Forum Gallery. So that's awesome that you got with
Mm.
them. Tell me how that ended up happening.
Yeah, they're great. I'm very lucky. It kind of just came about as I was working with Peter Marcel, who was a gallerist in New York, part of Gerald Peters' gallery.
Mm-hmm.
He had found my work from a friend of his who had been on Facebook and saw my work and called me up and sort of was like, would you like to send me something? And then I did. And then that piece went, I think they sold it or something. And then they were happy. And then they wanted more work from me. And so that relationship really evolved organically. And then he ended up that partnership that he was in with Gerald Peters, I think sort of they split. And then he took me to Forum and was like, I think I'm going and doing this other thing. And maybe you would like to, you know, work with Forum. So he introduced me to them. I was really lucky.
Yeah, you are in some good company there. There are some
Yeah.
great painters. I mean, Stephen Assail is there. Is Odd Nerdrum still showing in Forum?
Yeah, they have pieces of Odd Nurtured, yeah.
Yeah, you're in great company. Holy moly. But you deserve
Yeah,
it because you're at that level. Your
thank
work is
you.
just really amazing. So, okay, a couple things. How you mentioned that charcoal's fragile. How have you gotten around that? And how do you frame these things? How do you protect them?
So they're framed under Optium acrylic glass, like Optium True View, which is like a type of museum glass. It's a beautiful product. It's
But it's
expensive, but
acrylic glass, so
it's
it's
an
like
acrylic glass.
plexiglass.
It's not plexiglass. It's museum acrylic glass.
But it's not
So
glass. That's what I'm trying to clarify. Is it actually glass or is it some other material?
it's some other material, I
Okay,
think.
it's
But
acrylic.
it's not, all I've been told is because I once referred to it as plexiglass and then
They're like,
um,
no, plexiglass is for
everyone was like,
amateurs. Yeah.
no, it is not
Okay, but
plexiglass.
the point
However,
is
since
it's
then, I've been
acrylic. It's
careful
not
with my
actually
language.
glass. It's acrylic.
Right. It's an
Okay.
acrylic glass-like thing that, I
Right,
mean, when
right.
it's pretty remarkable in person because it's truly virtually invisible. It's a beautiful product. I mean, it's anti-glare and I mean, you can't see any reflections in it. It's just really, and UV protective. So it's great.
But
Yeah.
what about scratch resistance?
Scratch resistant.
It is? So you don't have to
Yeah.
be really fragile with it? Because if a plexiglass, that terrible thing, if you so much as wipe it with a paper towel, it becomes cloudy.
Yeah. This
That's
is
not the
very
case with
different.
this stuff?
No. It behaves like glass.
No kidding.
Yeah.
But is it but will it break like glass? I'm assuming they use this because
No.
it's really durable in large panels too.
Right. So it doesn't break like glass, which is its other advantage is that it's much safer than glass and I think lighter
Wow.
glass. I mean, not a lot lighter than glass, but lighter so that it makes the whole thing a little bit less, unwielding. So
Wow. I got to get my hands on some of this stuff. It sounds
yeah, it's
amazing.
great. Optium, True View, acrylic.
Okay. Thanks for not
Yeah,
saying glass. Like,
sure. Well, they call it acrylic
I
glass.
know, I
That's
know.
why, yeah.
It's like giclée prints. That's one of my pet peeves. You've heard the term giclée prints, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
And
it
yeah.
just means ink, like something like ink blot. It basically means printed on an inkjet printer, but it sounds so fancy. It's
Mm,
funny how they use those names as a marketing, and give them a marketing advantage.
right.
Um, anyway, okay. So then the other thing is, as far as fixative and stuff, do you fix them or do you not need to because it's all compressed?
I fix them light. Yeah, I do. Like lightly, I'll do a couple rounds before I, pack them up and ship them.
But when you're doing something this big, are you using like spray equipment or something, or are you actually just using a spray can?
I just use a spray can and a ladder
Really?
and
Okay.
mhm,
You would
and
think you'd
just
have like an
I'm very
industrial spray
careful.
equipment for something this big.
Mhm. 'Cause I mean, I'm
Okay.
not spraying the white of the paper. I'm just spraying where the drawing lives on
Oh,
the
really?
paper. Yeah.
And what product are you using there? Because I found that there are some products that will change the values of the charcoal and others
Yes.
that won't.
I've found the same thing.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what are you using?
I'm using Lascaux archival fixative.
And obviously you're happy with that. It's not changing the values.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, I think it's been okay. That one has been okay for me. Yeah.
Really? Okay. And
That sounds like you've had some bad experiences with it,
oh
though.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, they're not all created equal. It's so
Yeah.
frustrating when you do a drawing and you spend so many hours trying to get just the right value and then you fix it and it's like, what? You just completely ruined it.
Yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
why I also, when I fix, I fix pretty lightly because I know it's going to be under glass anyway. And
Hmm.
I really I fix the darkest areas of the drawing where where the charcoal is really like pregnant on the paper.
Yeah.
And the areas that are like more subtle value and tone and that I know that I've really pressed into the paper, they're there. They're safe. So I don't really yeah, I try to leave those areas alone when I'm
And
fixing.
there's no chance that this fixative could go yellow and then you get blotchy yellow anywhere or on these
It's
random places.
non-yellowing. Yeah,
Not
I've never had
completely
any
non-yellowing.
problem. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
when you're working this big, how do you have an enormous studio? How are you checking your values? Do you step back a
All the time.
long way?
Yes, all the time. So this is like I think it's the secret to drawing at a large scale is that you need to be able to stand far away from what
Yeah,
you're
you
working on.
do.
So it's like my studio, I always describe it to people like it's kind of like an airport runway or something.
It's like a
I have
hallway.
like a hallway. Yes,
Yeah.
essentially. And I have the piece that I'm working on one spot on the wall. And then otherwise, I'm making all of my drawing decisions from at least 10 or 15 feet away from the drawing. So I'm not making any decisions about the drawing when I'm in front of it. I'm only making those decisions from a distance, which I think is also partly why my drawings don't have kind of that super refined, hyper realist feeling of every pore and everything because I'm just making big value decisions from a distance,
Right.
or big like tonal shape decisions from a distance, big proportion decisions from a distance. And so the surface then of the drawing, sometimes I've even had the experience of like um, finishing a piece and like getting ready to ship it out. And then I'm like in front of it and looking at it. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the first time I've really stopped to look at it up close, like to see what it looks like up close. And then I'm like, oh, this looks, I don't know. It can be a surprise to me because I'm just really, really in my mind looking at the drawing from a distance always.
So when you're doing these subtle values, let's say in the face, you and it's a huge face, You have to step back, make a note, say, oh, up here in the cheek is a little bit too light. Let me add 3% gray to it. You go up there and you basically remember that it just needs to be 3% gray, and you adjust it, and then you step back and check your work.
Exactly. Yeah. So the whole process of drawing for me is approaching, you know, uh, yeah, backing away and then approaching again and backing away. I'm just moving the whole time while I'm drawing. I'm never really standing still.
Yeah. Do you wear one of those step watches? How many steps that you're taking every day?
No.
I bet that's why you're in such great shape. You look like you're pretty lean. I think that's a good habit for anybody, whether you're working life size or not. And
Yeah.
I'm the same way. I mean, I work big too. Most of my painting, I don't know, my figures aren't as big as yours, but my paintings are quite large. And so I have to step back a lot too. But I often tell a story of this old studio I had that was carpet. And it was like this exterior carpet that I put in because it was really durable, and the floors were plywood. So I wanted to cover it with something. And I was there 5 years. And by the time I moved out, I literally had walked a trail through the carpet down to plywood. That was about 10 or 15 feet long, back and
Oh,
to my
wow.
easel and back. Yeah, that's
Wow.
how much walking I did in that one spot.
I believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's the way, I mean, it's the way to go for me, at least, to
Hmm.
work like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I often notice when I walk in my classroom and I see my students and they've got their toes on the easel and their face is right up against the drawing. And I can stare at them for 10, 20 minutes and just notice that they haven't backed up one time.
Mm.
And I'm
Yeah.
constantly hounding them. I'm like, you guys, this drawing is an active process. You don't just stand there and tickle the paper. You got to be moving back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, even
Right.
if you're not doing it life size. But it's a hard lesson to learn
Right.
sometimes.
It is. But then I think once you get into the habit of it, then it's just really, it's the way you
You
draw
can't
and you
help it.
can't imagine doing anything else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it becomes like a tick. You just back
Right.
up constantly.
Right. Because
Yeah.
I think you can just, it's so much easier to see from a distance. Then you can judge the relationships. Yeah, it's just so much easier because I think that the other challenge of, I mean, or one of the big technical, yeah, one of the big challenges of technical drawing is kind of keeping the micro and the macro together, like holding both in your mind at the same time, of like these large shapes and how they relate to one another, and also what's going on within each shape. And I think that to kind of keep that awareness of the whole and its parts, you have to be, backing up.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only way to see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Man, I just had a question and then I was so interested in what you were saying, it made me lose it. Um, and it was such a great question too.
Oh
I'm
no.
just kidding. I don't know if it was a good question or not. All right, well, while I try and think of it, let's pull up some more of your work here. Oh, maybe this detail shot. Well, let's start with this and then move into this detail. God, these are so pretty.
Mm.
My gosh. Oh, I'm glad you posted. Oh, it is that paper. It is. Well, maybe it's not, but I think
Well,
this is the,
to be fair, I should say
yeah.
it's interesting because this was a paper that I didn't like
Oh, funny.
because the weave of the paper I found really distracting. So it's interesting that I have a detail of this one. I should post more details of my work. I'll start
Is
doing
this,
that.
yeah, this one's got that zigzag weave to it.
Yeah, it's
Maybe
got
this
like
isn't it.
it's got a pretty dominant like woven feeling, which I mean, everyone's different. I mean, I actually love that in linen sometimes when you can kind of feel the weave, especially if it's like a beautiful weave, if the linen is a nice quality linen. But on this particular paper, I wasn't, yeah, I was fresh. I was fighting it a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that
So the
funny?
paper that I normally use doesn't have that kind of woven feeling like this
It
one does.
doesn't. Oh man, I'm really curious what it is that you're using. Because now the more closely I look at this isn't artistico because it's zigzaggy. But at first I
Mm.
thought it might be. At least I don't think it is. Artistico is not zigzaggy. Um, Yeah, so is this typically what it looks like up close? Is this a pretty good idea of what we would see if we could zoom into any of your drawings?
Um, yeah, you mean in terms of the simplicity kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
shapes? Yeah, I think that, I mean, it depends on the piece, but I typically leave them pretty um, yeah, unrefined maybe, or even, I mean,
Right.
they're refined, but they're
Not
not
hyper
like,
realist, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
not overly detailed maybe, or I don't know the right word for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there
Yeah.
any tips you could give people who are learning how to draw that might help them to achieve the kind of success that you're achieving in your charcoal drawings?
Mm.
I mean, you've already given a few, like stepping back
Yeah.
and
Stepping back is huge.
yeah,
I mean, I think a lot of observational drawing is really helpful, like forgetting what you know about something and just looking at it instead. Forgetting what you think you know, like about an apple or a water bottle or anything or a person's face, and instead really just looking at the face very, very carefully, really thinking about it, thinking about the direction of light and where light is falling and how that might kind of, yeah, follow the form.
mm-hmm. What about for managing proportions, especially when working at this scale? How do you manage proportions?
Well, I think it's really about standing back again, not to be repetitive, but I think, I mean, when I'm starting a big piece like this, I'll make a couple notes about like the top lines of things where I know I want the figure to sit on the page, like the
Right.
top of the head, bottom of the foot, a few other key points, kind of where your eye, especially if they're like high contrast moments, like
Mm-hmm.
where there's a lot of light and dark, because then your eye is really seeing that visual information. And so you want to pay attention to it when you're mapping out the proportions, because you can kind of use that as an anchor point visually, because your eye is really anchoring to that place, like the shoulder, for instance, here.
Mm-hmm.
And then
But if
kind
you
of,
put, but if you put a mark at the top of the head and you
yes,
put a mark at the top of the foot, you've established the height of the figure. That's fixed. Like there's not whatever you put is right because it's just two marks. It's right because you said it's right. But then once
correct,
you do a horizontal measurement, say from the elbow to the shoulder, now that could be wrong because now that's in context to the vertical one. So when you're making those huge decisions, how do you know you're putting them in the right place without more context? I mean, do you have methods for example, are you standing back and doing comparative measuring? I mean, are there other tools or devices you use in order to get these proportions?
I mean, I'm really seeing the figure. I think another part of drawing is trying to like simplify the information that you're seeing, especially in the
Hmm.
beginning, into big shapes, like big blocky shapes, using like only straight lines and really thinking about it as like some kind of parallelogram.
Right.
And, so I'll look at the shape of the figure and kind of like, okay, decide that it has to be like it's the, this shape kind of, and then
Right. Right.
start to put in more and more information. But I mean, to your point about like you need more context in order to kind of know where you are and whether you're right or wrong. Um, yeah, I mean, I sort of think about the process of drawing like a funnel. It's like a funnel of information. And when you begin, it's like everything is possible. And then as you refine, 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 you're kind of distilling the marks to where they need to be. So when I'm
Hmm.
putting those first few lines, maybe the top and the bottom, I'm anchoring, but then everything that follows from there, I'm continually adjusting to kind of try to lock it in until it starts to feel like it's the right um, shape.
Are your anchor points flexible? In other words, when you get further along and you start really getting the proportions correct, do you find that your original anchor points can move a little bit? Or do you allow them to move? Or are you, this is where the foot's going, this is where the head's going, and I have to get the proportions to fit in between these two marks, period?
Well, I think that, I mean, if sure, I would move an anchor point if I felt like everything else in the drawing was working,
Hmm.
except for, oh, like I initially drew the head too short, but or like too squashed and needs to go up a little bit and have more space for the head, but everything else feels really solid, then yeah, of course, I would definitely give myself a little more space, then move the head up if it needs to. But I think, yeah, it's just about like kind of finding a hook. That's what the anchors are for. It's like a hook that you're trusting that information and then building off of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if what you build off of it is successful and strong, then yeah, you can use it as a reference to then go back and kind of edit or refine that initial hook, um, if you need to. But normally, if you've built off of that first hook is probably right. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
I think so. Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you this. So when you go to, let's see, where was that one we looked at a minute ago? Oh, I lost it. Oh, is this it? Oh, yeah, this is it. Or isn't it? Okay, well, let me ask the question based on this one. So if I were to draw this big, because I find it, and I wonder if you find this to be the case too, I find it much more difficult to get a good likeness if I'm locked in between 2 points. So let's say I knew the head had to be between the bottom of the chin here, or let's say the base of the neck or the top of the neck, and the hairline here. If I knew the head had to be there, which it would have to be if I've already drawn the figure, it has to be that big. It can't be too big or too small, right?
Yeah.
If I have to get a likeness between those two lines, that's much more difficult than getting a likeness where I have some space to work within, where those lines are not fixed, right? And do you know what I mean?
I'm not sure that I work that way. I think maybe I work in a different way because for me, having those two lines be fixed helps me find all of the other shapes that I need.
So when you're getting the head in, you would literally say it needs to stop here and stop here, and then you put the likeness within those two lines.
Um, Yes, I mean, I would also do like a center line for the eyes and the nose. I would start to I'd approximate like, okay, the position of the head is kind of like this and like this. And then, but once I would get the scale of the head of like, okay, I know that the head is going to be this big between these 2 points, then I can develop the likeness kind of relative to that size.
Okay, so yeah, so we're on the same page. I'm just not expressing myself very well.
Oh, okay.
So what I'm saying is if I were to just start with a white piece of paper, right? Just basic, completely white piece of paper, and I would have put, let's see if I can make my pencil work here. Okay, and I were to put, can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay, and I were to put a line here and here. One is for the hairline, and one's for the base of the chin. Now, if I say that those cannot be moved, period, and then try and build a likeness between those two lines, it would be much more difficult for me to do it that way than to start with some basic things like figure out where the eyes are, get a basic center line and some of the things you described, and then decide, okay, now that I've got a general layout of the head, let me lock in these 2 points and lock it in at that point. The latter would be easier, but working in two fixed points is to me much more difficult. For example, if I'm doing a multi-figure painting, okay, and I've got 3 figures, say, and I've already done the other 2 figures, and I know that for it to work, that the third figure has to be this big. I am bound between these two lines. That figure is going to be more difficult than the first figure, where I could, if the forehead was too short, I could just lift it a little instead of having to incrementally move every feature down, a little bit, right?
Right.
I could just lift the forehead. But when you're stuck between two lines, you can't just lift the forehead. No, now you have to incrementally move every single feature down, the eyes down 1 millimeter, the nose down 2 millimeters, the mouth down 3, right? And then in order to get the height of the forehead you want, because you're stuck between those two lines. Do
Mm.
you see what I'm
I
saying?
don't, I do. I never would draw so in quite such a rigorous way, kind of as you're describing.
So you
Like
wouldn't
with those,
bind yourself between two lines like that, that
not like
rigorously.
within, no, not like within a millimeter. No.
Okay. Okay.
Because
So
they're like it's like a roadmap. It's like a loose roadmap, and kind of even like what I've drawn for the rest of the body that like, and I found that of course like through other marks that then I erased. Like as I would kind of go into those areas and develop them, inevitably they'd probably move around a little bit. Like I mean, I'm not like once I have that roadmap down, I'm not completely like married to it. I might be kind of it's a little bit more organic than that. I'm kind of always stepping back and reevaluating the whole, reevaluating the position of things and trying to keep them locked in. Um, but I wouldn't, yeah, I mean, when I make the face, I mean, I'm putting in like the top line, bottom line, like you kind of like these little marks that you made
yeah.
red. But I mean, I am doing that with maybe a center line for the head to kind of like just find the general positionings of things and then kind of keep finessing them as I move
So
along.
what happens when you are using multiple figures? Then do you feel like you have to get proportions locked or not, or fix the size of the second or third figure and work much more in a much more calculated way in order to not have one figure be weirdly large or small next to the other one?
Um, the truth is that I think that when I'm working in, oh, I mean, I don't work with multifigural compositions very often, although I want to start doing that more. But when I've done it in the past, I really see them kind of as one figure, weirdly.
Oh, okay, because you have it all in one reference.
Yeah, I'll have it all in one reference. I mean,
Okay,
yeah, when I'm working, I have it all in one reference. And um,
that makes
maybe I'll
sense. Okay.
eventually maybe I'll have like multiple references because I do sometimes kind of like start to do things differently, but in terms of like if I want proportions and I want some kind of like accuracy about how the figures are relating to one another, I have it in one reference and I'm looking at it as one shape.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So that therein lies the difference and the reason I was having trouble communicating. Because oftentimes when I'm doing multi-figure, it's not one reference. And so I'm
I
using a
see.
perspective drawing in order to figure out this figure is going to have to be this big and this figure is going to have to be this big.
I
And
see.
in the
Oh, wow, that sounds
painting,
really
you see
hard
what I'm
and
saying? And in the painting,
fascinating.
I have
Yeah.
to make sure that that head is exactly that big
Right.
and make the features sit inside that space exactly right. Because if I move it up or down, the perspective gets screwed up and the
Right.
relative proportions get screwed up. So that's why I was wondering. But it leads to another question though. Is it do you and is this just a coincidence here that you refine the head first, or do you use the head once you get a good likeness as a measuring tool to figure out the length of the body and different proportions of the body?
I definitely use the head as a measuring tool for like how many heads will fit into the length of the body, for
Right.
instance. But I think in this particular piece, piece was finished on the right. I had decided this was during a period of time when I was really leaving pieces unfinished intentionally, because of how that spoke to the work conceptually. I was
Yeah.
kind of interested in this like weird tension between one area that's very developed and other areas that aren't, and the meaning behind that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that work was finished.
No kidding.
Um, yeah.
But
But
nonetheless, does it say anything about your process, even though this one's technically left unfinished? Would a finished drawing ever look like that? It looks like
I
it
think
would. Yeah.
this is more like how I work.
Okay.
Yeah, this is more how I work. So I'll put in big areas of tone like that, like big areas of kind of mapping out the drawing in kind of a scribbly loose way
Yeah.
and putting tone or value where I think it needs to be and like the general distances or shapes of things. And then I'll go into one area and kind of really render that area and then grow it out from that area.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's great. That That was, I don't know if I'm going to blame it on my cold that I'm having difficulty being articulate today and ask good question, but
No, no,
yeah, it was
no, not
tough
at
to get
all.
that one across. All right. Okay. This is a great one to show what you're talking about with the textures.
Mm.
Man, yeah. So would you call this area finished?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that
I
is
mean, I
not
think,
hyper realist at all.
no, they're not hyper realist at all.
Man,
I
it's
mean,
just Instagram.
yeah, it's just Instagram. I mean,
Your
different
values are
different
so
pieces
sensitive.
all. Oh, thanks. I mean, I think because I think that that's actually what it is that when you have values that are really, really carefully kind of like considered or coaxed out, you can achieve a sense of like profound realism that detail isn't achieved. You know, that's different than detail. Like detail is
Mm-hmm.
not does not equal realism. I mean, as of course you know, and many artists talk about, it's like realism is found through abstraction because like just like your eye when it's looking at something is not seeing every hair and every pore of a face. I mean, you're seeing the way that light is falling across the face. You're perceiving the values. So if you can, I mean, and even Richter was doing this in his work with like kind of the blurred pieces that he was
Mm-hmm.
doing.
Mm-hmm.
If you can capture the values convincingly, your mind will create realism.
And honestly, it's more real than hyperrealism, what you're doing. And it's
Mm,
probably because you're allowing your mind, the viewer's mind, to fill in all the pores because no one's looking at pores when you
right,
look at a face. You
right.
know, when we're having this conversation, obviously I can't see your pores from here, but even if I could, I wouldn't be looking at them, right? I'd be looking at your eyes and I'd be getting a general view of your whole head as you move
Right.
and talk to me. Um,
Yeah, it reminds me of there was a quote that I really loved by Milton Glaser,
mhm.
who was a graphic designer that did the I Love New York
Yeah,
t-shirts.
yeah.
But he always said that he was a Cooper Union alum. So which is, I think I learned this quote when I was at Cooper, when I was studying at Cooper Union. But he said something about how in every piece of art, he was like, what was he saying? That an art is like a puzzle, and that every good piece of art gives the last piece of the puzzle to the viewer to finish. So like
Oh,
that
yeah.
in every great work that you need to kind of leave one of the puzzle pieces missing because it invites the viewer in to kind of finish the piece and participate in it. And so I think information is similar in that way of like if you put in every last bit of information into the work, in a way you're kind of creating a barrier between, you know, the work and the viewer. So I think that leaving a certain amount of information open and abstracted kind of invites a different viewing experience.
But I don't think people know that that's what's happening. I agree
Mm,
with that statement 100%, but what's so interesting about painting to me is a great painting is kind of like great lighting in film. If it's done really, really well, people don't appreciate that it was done the way it was
yeah,
done. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you know, when you watch a film and it's just so incredible and you don't think, you're like, that's just the way it looks. That's just the way that bar scene looks with that moody lighting and the smoke and this, that, and the other. And what you don't realize is there are 27 lights shining in every different direction just to make it look like that it's a totally natural, completely candid scene.
yeah,
And I feel like oil painting is that way, where when it's done really well, the viewer doesn't know they're being given this ability to be involved in the work. They just look at it and feel like, as you put it earlier, it's more lifelike than life.
right,
They don't know they're being invited to participate.
right.
That's kind of the magic of it, I think.
That is the magic of it. I mean, or that's the magic of, like you said, I think of great painting is like when every stroke, when everything has kind of come together in a way where it feels really effortless, like every stroke of paint is exactly where it needs to be. And you feel that, even though there's no logical, intellectual explanation for it necessarily. It's like
Yeah.
energy thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's what
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so after that. I think all artists were all kind of chasing that thing, that mythical beast of making
I
a painting or making a drawing where it's like everything is that's there is exactly what needs to be there and nothing too much, nothing more.
yeah. I hope that it's things like that that will make artists never obsolete to AI.
Mm,
Because I just there is something so uniquely important about the human hand and the human decisions, creative decisions. At least
yeah.
I hope that's the case. This is maybe just me being sort of I don't know, being too romantic about painting, but I
No, I mean, that's how I feel about it. I'm weirdly not worried about it at all. I'm kind of excited, even maybe, of like, okay, there's a new technology and who knows what creative people are going to do with it and how it will enhance, what our visual experiences of the world. But I don't feel threatened by it because I think that you're right, that art speaks to something that's it's about touch and it's about, yeah, the humanity of the person that's making it. And I don't think that I think AI is doing something else.
hmm, yeah, I hope you're right. I think you are. I think you are, but we could all be wrong about many things, right? Oh man, I'm glad we're getting to see some details here. Again, you're right. It's just not that finished.
Yeah.
This is something that took me many years to learn, and I feel like sometimes I still don't have it right. But this is another thing that goes away from that photorealism or hyperrealism is look at look at, you drew it. Of course, you know it like the back of your hand, but to the viewers, let's say, look at this unfinished isn't the right word. Look at how much information is left out between the white of the eye, the top plate of the lower lid, and the front plane of the lower lid. It's all just blended together right through here. And
Yeah.
that's not the way it was in the photo reference.
No,
Yeah.
probably not.
And that's
I
what,
mean, because it's all, yeah, it's about fun. I love when you can lose lines like that. Like I
mm-hmm.
love the see and value and kind of like, oh, things start to merge. I think that there's so much magic in that because that is how your eye is seeing and experiencing the world largely, in kind of these big value clouds is how I think about them when I'm working.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And we're not looking at everything at once. And most things are in our peripheral.
right,
And I feel like when an artist does this, what they're doing is suggesting peripheral. Maybe it's not technically in the peripheral, like off to the edges, right? But it's saying this isn't important. Therefore, I'm going to draw it as though it's in the peripheral, slightly out of focus.
right.
Whereas this is important. So I'm going to make it sharp.
Right. And I think that there's so much fun in that too, or like that's an opportunity where you, as the artist, get to really design. You're, like you said, kind of curating the attention experience of the work. So you're like kind of leading someone through the face and, deciding what needs to be looked at and what can kind of just be supporting information.
So, what is your average size for these? I mean, well, let me put it this way. When was your last solo show and what did that look like visually? How big were these pieces?
My last solo show was right before the pandemic, so in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And I had, I think, oh boy, like 14 pieces, I think, in the show, something like that. And they were all large format. So
Wow.
it was pretty wild. I was so thrilled that Forum let me do that and gave me the space and, support to make that happen. But when you walked in, you were surrounded by, I think in the main room, there were just, yeah, all these large format. It was kind of like yeah,
I wish I could have seen that show.
pantheon of large format figures.
That must have been so fulfilling to stand in the gallery with all your work like that. So big and impactful in that
Yeah, I mean,
space.
I think that exhibitions are always a strange thing because there's so much buildup for them and you're putting so much into it. And then there's, you know, your own expectations of yourself that are very hard to meet often. And so I felt grateful for the opportunity, but I think that, yeah, I just want to do it again so I can try to do it better next time, kind of is the feeling that lingers.
Yeah, it feels to me, it always feels like this combination between I can't believe this is happening, this is so exciting, to oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm in my underwear while this is happening. Because you just
I
feel
think
so
it's a lot.
vulnerable at the same
Yeah.
time, and you just don't want anyone to look too closely because it's just not that good, right? That's how I feel when I have a show or I'm part of a show.
Mhm. I would
Hmm.
love to see your work in person because I've been following your work for so many years. And yeah, I would love to see it in person.
Oh, I hope to meet you someday. That'd be awesome. If you ever come into
Yeah.
the States, you'll have to let me know.
Okay.
Although you're going to end up in the East Coast, so it's still a long way away.
Mm.
Well, are there some pieces that you really, okay. I always do this. I start to say this question or ask you this question, then I find something else I want to look at. So this is what, colored pencil?
This is color pencil. So this is actually a pretty good, those first few clips in the video are a pretty good approximation for how I'm starting. Of kind of these like big shapes and angular because I think it's much easier to see in straight line than in more, in curvilinear line.
Oh my gosh, this is
So like that
insanity.
that spot there, kind of.
It's just so incredible what you can do with colored pencil. It's incredible what you personally can do with colored pencil, but what also amazes me is what can be done with colored pencil and what can be done with dirt floating in oil and
Yeah,
a stick that you literally could make over a campfire and
yeah,
draw with it. Isn't it mind blowing? Especially because
it
you're a
is.
charcoal artist. You are literally just smearing charcoal, burnt sticks around on a
Yeah.
paper and creating life.
It definitely, I mean, that's a funny aspect to charcoal that I've always really liked is that it's just such a humble material.
It is. It's crazy what you can do with it. I
Yeah.
literally remember sitting in a campfire, not, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, and charring a stick and then drawing on a rock and thinking, this is just willow. This feels like a willow stick. I could literally sit
Right.
here and do a portrait right here on this rock.
Yeah.
And with something like that, you can do something like this. It's just mind blowing. Yeah,
Yep.
man. So tell me about how you choose your subjects. What
Well,
inspires you?
this is my sister again, actually. But I really am an artist that works in series. So I often think in series. I mean, when I first moved to Switzerland, I was thinking a lot about kind of the bathers, like Cézanne, and I was just thinking a lot about kind of because I was also living next to a lake where a lot of people were. That's a big part of
Mm-hmm.
Switzerland and Swiss culture is this like kind of lake swimming, outdoorsy culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that it's kind of this strange moment of public intimacy or something of where people are revealing themselves, everyone is kind of in their underwear and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to kind of make a series about that. And so that was some of the earlier work that you were looking at was related, or it was during that time when I was going around the lake asking young women if they would let me draw them.
Mm-hmm.
And um,
So that
which
makes
was,
it pretty easy. Once you've got a series going, then you can just take off.
yeah. And I've always worked in series, even when I was at Cooper Union and before that, I always kind of think in multiple pieces. I kind of like to have multiple pieces in dialogue with one another in my studio. I just think that it kind of had something else to the work. Um, excuse me. And so that was in 2018 when I was doing the Bathers.
I just take a minute to recognize the people and companies that make this podcast possible. First, I want to thank you, my patrons. You are absolutely the most important and necessary sponsors of this podcast. Without you, we couldn't keep this thing going. If you love the show and are not yet a patron, please consider helping out. Go to theundrapedartist.com and click on the link Be My Patron on Podbean. And then just pick a monthly amount that fits your budget. What are 4 great podcasts a month worth to you? In my opinion, my sponsor Rosemary Brushes makes the best artist brushes available today. They have a huge inventory and are constantly innovating and adding new and interesting brushes to their line. They ship all over the world, and due to their exceptional customer service, you won't wait long to receive your order. To order some brushes for yourself, go to rosemaryandco.com. The HEIN Atelier began over 20 years ago in 2002. Due to limited space and high demand, in 2022, I adapted the entire curriculum to an online platform. While on our website and mobile app, students will find hundreds of hours of valuable recorded content, this online atelier is not just a website full of lessons, tutorials, and other resources. In this program, I personally mentor each student toward their artistic goals through weekly Zoom critiques, instruction, and regular in-app communications. To learn more or to sign up, go to heinatelier.com. Lastly, whether you're watching or listening on Apple Podcasts or just listening on another station like Spotify, please consider leaving me a 5-star review. If you watch on YouTube, consider giving me a follow and a thumbs up. These things really help the channel.
After that, I was, let's see, that would be 2020. That was when I started kind of dipping into color pencil and wanted to work with color. And so like the piece, I mean, I love Richter's Betty. That's a painting that I always really loved. And kind of this idea, first started thinking about narrative painting in 2020, because I had moved on from this more like static portraiture, like the portrait as monument, and was working, hiring people from the internet. I would put up ads on the like Zurich version of Craigslist, and then just find, people that are willing to work with me and invite them to my studio and make drawings of them. And then, and also working with friends and family members. So it's kind of that's a long answer to a simple question of that.
So now you're doing
subjects are all over the
portraits.
place.
Now you're essentially doing portraits of friends and people in Zurich, is what you're saying. That's your current work.
My current work, no, because I just had a show with Alyssa Monks at Forum in January. And that body of work was really about desire and kind of thinking more about narrative painting and using even myself or my friends as actors and kind of staging us to create compositions, and thinking a lot about kind of like voyeurism. And that was, a lot too with the turning away portraits, like the backs of people's heads. I kind of like creates this like strange intimate space of like where you're seeing them and they're not maybe aware of you looking at them. Like, because I'm always kind of interested in this relationship between the audience and the subject. So like when I'm making, a lot of my portraits are very self-possessed, confrontational gaze. They're looking at you, and it almost kind of, because of their scale, it almost kind of flips this relationship of like who's looking at who a bit. It kind of makes the person, I think, experiencing the work as though they're the one being scrutinized or looked upon. And I think that, with the history of women in Western figurative painting and, the male gaze and then the female gaze, I kind of liked just having, a gaze that giving my work its own gaze, returning the gaze, and having the subjects of my pieces have their own gaze.
Interesting. I like that.
And I think that the scale, the monumentality of my work, like lends itself well to that, because it's, they're kind of larger than life figures that are really real and kind of looking at you. And so it kind of adds to the quality of all of that. So I think that as a response to that, now with the back of the head, it's kind of like a whole denial of that, of kind of the subjects of my work no longer looking at you at all. and maybe even turning away from you, or yeah, not being present, but still being very present in the work, because it's of course a large format, portrait of them. So I've been thinking about all of these kinds of ideas and thinking about the intimacy of that too, of the back of someone's head. So anyway, that's what the research is about.
You know, what I can't get over is every medium you pick up, it's as though you've been doing it for 30 years. I mean, you haven't done oil painting for a while, and then you pick it up and it's just like this. It's like, what the heck? Is there anything you don't do well? And it makes me kind of curious. Have you ever tried watercolor?
I have tried watercolor, and it's not a medium for me.
It's hard, huh?
It's so hard. And it's so opposite than charcoal. I mean, charcoal is like you can endlessly play with it, and kind of it's so forgiving. And I love that about charcoal. Charcoal, it's so flexible. And watercolor is just like, for me, feels, yeah, like on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, I don't do watercolor either because of that. I admire anyone who pulls off really, really convincing realism with watercolor, because it's a stubborn medium.
Same.
Yeah, I was curious, but I bet you would be good at it if you did it, if you spent more time, because I mean, you seem to just, everything you touch seems to turn to gold.
Oh, thanks.
This is one of my favorites, and obviously it's the most recent that you posted. I think well, maybe it's not obvious, is it? I think it
It's
is.
one of the more
Oh
recent
yeah,
ones.
one of
Yeah.
the recent ones. Yeah. Oh my gosh, this model is so interesting too. And
She's,
the
I met her in
lighting.
Italy.
What's that?
I met her in Italy. Yeah, in a small town.
Wow. Yeah. That is just beautiful.
Thank you.
So, do you ever work small? Do you ever do studies, like small studies or anything? I mean, I don't see them on your website, but
Well, that little, I think you already clicked on it, but the little color pencil of that's next to like
this
the
one?
eye, that one, yeah, that's very small. That's the smallest piece that I've done in a long time.
And where is this
Um,
painting or drawing?
that's here in Zurich. I mean, I just did that a couple weeks ago.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Okay, we need to talk. I wonder what you'd sell this for. You'd have to tell me off the air. But
Um,
that is
And so I
gorgeous.
have lately, I've been kind of wanting to, because the problem with working large is that it can be sometimes a time commitment. And lately have been feeling like I want to just play with ideas faster.
Yeah.
And so I've been thinking that I might, start working on some smaller pieces. So, yeah.
Well, artists need to do what's moving to them. So I'm not making suggestions here. But what is unfortunate when artists work large is that that people who don't have room for them, it's just out of it's impossible for them to show them or display them. So I collect, because I'm in a relatively small house, Victorian house with windows everywhere. I have like room for like 3 big paintings, and that's it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the reason I ask, is I wonder, because when I buy paintings, I have to buy small painting. But you must not be having trouble selling these monsters. I mean, it seems like things are going good for you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very lucky. So
Man.
it works. I mean, for me, I'm not very practically minded. I mean, even when I started making the very large format charcoal drawings, I had no idea how I was going to ship them or frame them or display them. I wasn't thinking about any of that, to be honest. I think I was just naively going after it because I knew I had this idea in my mind of these large figures on paper, and I wanted to see them. So I've kind of always just let myself be led by my artistic curiosity, and then kind of figure it out after.
Isn't that the best way to be creative though? Because if you have to have a solid, secure plan for every creative endeavor that you undertake, you're never going to do anything great. You almost just have to put your head down and be like, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I'll figure it out
And
as I
it's
go.
so funny. Yeah. And it's so funny. I'm sure you had the experience too. I keep having this experience over and over again where I'm working on something because I'm like, okay, this is the kind of work that I make and this is what I need to do. And then I'll have a side piece or a side project going that I'm like kind of secretly doing because I just like really am curious about it and playing with it. And I'm doing it thinking, I'm not going to show this to anyone. This is just something that I'm doing. But then that ends up being the interesting work. And then that's the work that
Really?
eventually, takes stage.
Is that, give
And
me an example of one of those that you never thought you'd show. Is any of it on here?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go down, there are definitely pieces like that.
I'm just
I mean,
curious of one that you thought you might not show.
the work in 2019
All
that
of
I
it.
was doing, yeah, kind of all of it. When I first started making it, I was thinking, oh, I'm not going to show this work
Oh,
because
you're
it
talking
just
about the
felt
beach
like,
stuff.
oh no, sorry, the more of the like body, yeah, body playing
This
with
stuff.
body,
The,
presentations of the body, yeah, that
okay.
stuff.
No kidding. And how much of it did
And
you do?
then
There's not that much of it.
I did quite a lot of it because like even the piece, the portrait of Sarah, which is the like very strong silhouette,
This one here?
that piece, yeah.
That's a
That's
great
also
piece.
that's a piece where like I mean I created these shoulders. These shoulders are like not
Yeah, I
her
guess.
shoulders.
Yeah, I guess they're kind of
Um,
masculine shoulders.
yeah. But so I was making a lot of that work, but let's see what other examples I can like if you go further down, there's a very old piece that I was just looking at the other day. It's further down. Yep, it's right there with it's uh the portrait of the woman on the towel in a bikini with like a
Here?
landscaper. Yeah, that piece. Like that was the piece that I never thought I would show.
Really? You devoted that much time to something you didn't think you'd show?
Yeah, well, because
Holy
it was an
crap.
experiment. I mean, I was
Holy crap, you are the real deal.
I was curious about this, about like a figure in a space and really making something abstract and strange and kind of like the heaviness of the arm, like making the body surreal and strange and kind of like the simplicity of like these fingers, like her fingers and toes and kind of like I wanted it to kind of feel like that arm feels like a heavy lump of clay kind of, and then this strange like abstracted towel and this looming shadow shape that's like I don't know, and kind of the flatness of the grass, all of these things I wanted to experiment and play around with it in a drawing, and I didn't think that I would ever exhibit it or post it on Instagram, and then I did. But
Now that
anyway.
you've said that looming shadow, all I can think about is some creepy dude in the bushes. You totally screwed it up for me.
Oh
I'm just
no.
kidding. No, I
Well,
still love it.
there's a painting that I love called Night
Yeah.
by Ferdinand Hodler, and who's a Swiss painter. And he's sort of like, I don't know, the who would be a good parallel? I don't know. He's like kind of the Swiss artist that I think a lot of like Swiss kids learn about in like their art school class, kind of. He's like a classical Swiss painter. And but he made this one painting. Oh my God, it's so bizarre of like these bodies that are all sleeping
Mm-hmm.
and like a big horizontal composition. And there's all these sleeping figures. And then right in the center, there's a nightmare figure of like a demon. And it's this big black shape that's like over someone, kind of like in a blanket, kind of like crunch, like, yeah, like sitting on top of one of the sleeping people. And it's such an amazing piece. I
Wait, what's
love
it
this.
called? Let's look it up. Do
It's
you remember?
Night by Hodler.
Um, okay, you have to spell that name for me. I'm terrible at spelling.
Sure. Ferdinand, so Ferdinand, and then Hodler is Hodler. And the
Okay.
painting is called Night.
Oh, it's one of the first to come up. Oh, yeah. I've never seen that painting.
It's so good. I love this. I just think it's great.
Yeah, that's something.
And I'm not even such a fan of narrative painting, but I mean, this is just so cool. And I love kind of like the use of flat shapes kind of like this tension between something that feels very volumetric and then something very flat in kind of the pictorial plane. And yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, thanks for introducing me to another artist. I'm not even familiar with this artist. Shows my ignorance. That's really cool work. I also love that combination of abstract flatness with realism.
Yeah.
Always have. That's a cool painting.
Yeah. So
Well,
it's something that I think about.
yeah.
Yes.
All right. So it's interesting to hear you describe your own work the way you were, like that, the way you describe this arm being heavy, like clay and stuff I never noticed. I, but now that you describe it, I see what you're talking about. I mean, you captured all the things that you were after. And yet there's still, even though you almost describe her like she's got this meat Popeye arm or something, but it's not that. She still has a lot of grace to her, and yet you capture that heaviness while still maintaining that grace to the figure, I think.
Thank you. I mean, she's incredibly beautiful, and
Yeah, she's
as a
cute.
like, I mean, I think that this is more just me playing with. Oops, sorry.
Do you want to get that? Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Hi, Dad. I'm gonna have to call you back.
I love it.
All right, bye. Sorry.
No,
It's
let me ask you this. Is this your sister again?
Yeah, this is my sister.
My gosh,
again.
what is your sister doing? She is beautiful. Is she
I know, she's so beautiful.
does she model for anyone besides you?
Mm-mm. Yeah, I'm very lucky.
Yeah, well, so are you though. But you don't paint yourself very much, I noticed.
No.
Have you ever painted yourself?
No, just the back of my head. I've started painting the back of
Why
my
don't
head.
you do self-portraits?
I don't know. It just hasn't never been a thing that's really, moved me. I mean, because I think I don't know.
Huh.
I feel like, I don't have a good answer. I think I wouldn't know how I would depict myself, because I think that, I can, like, faces are very plastic kind of in a way of like how you can light them and kind of pull one quality out. I mean, that's what I'm thinking about with my subjects all the time. It's like, I feel like you can light someone in a certain way and really transform them and make them look in a different, like bring out one aspect of them. And so I'm always kind of looking and trying to figure out which aspect of the figure or of the person I'm looking to kind of coax out. And I think that for myself, I'm not sure like which part of me I would want to draw, or if I would, I don't know,
Yeah.
it's just not something
Your
that
work's
I've
too
really.
conceptual to paint yourself, draw yourself, because you're too close to yourself. So if I were to do a self-portrait, it would just be an exercise in painting a portrait, and I'm a convenient model. But it seems to me that when you look at a face for many of these series, if not all of your works, you're looking deeper and trying to figure out something to focus on about that face. And you're probably just too close to your own face to do that.
Yes, maybe very well said. I think that might be it.
But I think
I
think you owe it to the world. I think you owe it to the world to do a self-portrait, though. Seriously, because you're a prominent artist, and someday when your paintings are in museums all over the world and you're passed away, a good self-portrait of you would be valued by many, I think. Anyway,
well,
take it for what it's worth. That's just one guy's opinion. Okay. But okay, so I'm going to ask you one final question.
Okay.
And that is, if you had one piece of advice for an aspiring artist that you wish you had, or maybe you did have, that was helpful to you, what would it be?
Oh, good question. I mean, I've listened to the podcast, and
so you know the question, yeah?
Yeah, I know the question, and I thought about the question in case you were going to ask me this. And I liked what Aaliyah Chapin said in her answer to you.
Isn't she something?
She's amazing.
You too,
I love
do you
her.
know? Do you know her personally?
For so long. I've met her very briefly. I don't even think I went to her opening and talked to her. I don't even think that she knew who I was, but I really have admired her for a
Yeah.
very long time. And
I
yeah,
don't
I just
remember what
love
she said. What did she say?
She was talking about kind of like taking the advice that you want and then leaving the rest.
Ah, I do
And
remember that.
I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that. I mean, when I think about myself, as a young artist, I was so eager to look for answers outside of myself. And the evolution of my work and of my person is kind of realizing that like you have the answers, like really it's going to come from you. And so I think that a real sign of artistic maturity is leaning into the interests that you have unapologetically. Like if you're curious about something, it's just so easy to talk yourself out of it and to think of all the reasons why it's not a smart enough idea or it's not an original enough idea. And I think that trusting yourself is just huge. And I think that that extends into, a technical language too. If you're like wanting to learn how to draw, of course, there's lots of different ways that you can learn how to draw technically, and that can be valuable information. But I think ultimately, what's going to set you and your work apart is you and what you bring to the table, like your own touch and your own eye and your own aesthetic. And so I think that, yeah,
That's good advice.
yeah.
You know what I often think about when it comes to originality and being authentic, which I think is what you're more or less describing, just being authentic to yourself, is we all have, it's amazing. There's 8 billion of us. And maybe there's a couple people in the world that look something like me, but no one looks exactly like me or exactly like you.
Yeah.
And our brains and our idiosyncrasies and our temperaments are equally unique from every other person on this planet.
Yeah.
And yet it's so common in art schools and among artists or aspiring artists to feel this pressure to try and model our own face. And all we have to do is embrace our own face.
Right.
And I mean that metaphorically, our face being our own idiosyncrasies and our own temperaments and our own values and all the things that make us us, because it's already 1 in 8 billion. We don't have to
Right.
try that hard. And yet it's that constant pressure to like, oh, we have to be original. We're born original, for crying out loud, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
yeah, that's great advice. And I got to tell you, you're not shy at all. I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know. I'm pretty shy.
We just talked for 2 solid hours. This was
Wow.
nothing.
My
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
Time
We
flew
just
by.
talked for 2 solid hours.
Well,
And it
you're
was
very easy to talk to.
yeah, well, thanks. So are
thank
you.
you.
And I'm really, thanks again for doing this. It's such an honor to meet you. I hope if you ever do come into the States, we get to meet. Are you having a show in New York anytime soon?
Well, I mean, I'm up right now. Forum has a group show up that I'm part of.
No, one that you're
I
going to
will
be flying into New York for.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I'll keep you posted.
Keep me posted, because it might be worth flying into New York. My parents still live there anyway. It'd be fun to
Oh,
meet you
great.
and see your work in
Oh,
person.
thanks. Yeah, it would be so great to meet you.
Yeah.
And yeah, please, likewise, if you have any work in New York ever, please let me know.
I will. Yeah.
You're showing it. I want to see your work too.
Well, thanks again. It was an honor.
Thanks, Jeff. This was great.
Thanks for tuning in to the Undraped Artist Podcast. If you enjoyed it, subscribe. And if you could, leave a comment or review. That really helps the channel. Please share the show with your friends, and if you're feeling generous, consider a monthly donation at theundrapedartist.com. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week.